then we try to link it to low cost innovation for low and middle income countries, particularly from the healthcare related aspect. Some specific examples that we present in that particular chapter include digital learning, blended learning, digital health, 3D printing, data science, health informatics, artificial intelligence, and so on. So we talk about the challenges and opportunities of those. The chapter is not super long. Actually, it's a very short chapter. We briefly touch upon those as examples. The purpose is not to get academic on those specific examples of technology, just to kind of give a very broad view of these things and how do they link up to health tech for low middle income countries. And then what is CCIT's take on technology and innovation from that perspective. So that's the very brief preamble outline of that particular chapter. And Marine mentioned that this webinar series is really meant to be a conversation starter, and it's around innovation storytelling, and all the speakers and panelists that we've had so far, we've always encouraged them to kind of tell us their story. Even if the questions are very direct or specific, we would like Zen you to answer it in a way that it's kind of like a story. Tell us a story for each and every question. And so without further ado, first question to you, Zen, is that for someone who has been in the tech field for the past 22 years, how important is technology from an innovator's perspective, specifically for healthcare? What would you say to that?
First, I want to just give a nod to the chapter. I think that was an excellent chapter. I know and I really like the way the book is laid out. So I highly recommend the book to folks too. It's a very quick download from Amazon. You can have it on your e-reader and just go. So I think that's really good. And thanks for sharing about the book earlier. It's been a really good read for me too. So technology and innovation, I really like how it's been placed in the chapter. I'll tell you what I feel about it. So I think technology provides a bit of a platform, right? And then technology can be used in many ways and put into practice in healthcare in many different ways. We've all experienced COVID in a different way across the world. In Canada, what we've noticed is that it's been an innovation accelerator for us. And that's you will hear that a lot about COVID itself, because one, it aligned all of us into a single file and a single problem that we all need to deal with at a global level. I wish all public health issues that we have were dealt in that way, because we would solve a lot of things much quicker. And the other thing it did was that it aligned us in making decisions. So decisions that in Canada we saw were taking, close to about 10 years were being taken in a matter of days. And many of those decisions were, of course, for direct patient care and enabling better care for individuals in their respective countries. And many of those were actually to enable digital transformation of the healthcare system. So I do believe that having the technology base that we have, its smartphones, etc., gave us that opportunity to like a trampoline more than anything else for us to innovate much more quicker than we would normally. So I think that's a really important tie between technology and innovation. I do, and I bring this up in many conversations that I have, is that as folks in the health sector, even though we are, some of us are not as lucky to be frontline and dealing with patients directly, which is a really key thing. We are enabling that from behind. I do feel we need to make sure that every patient problem that we pick up, we give it the same sort of priority as we have with COVID, right? I think that's going to be one of our lessons as we come out of the pandemic, is that there are other things that may not affect us globally, but nationally in pockets, there are public health things that are affecting us so much, and we can do better. So that's, absolutely, I think innovation should enable those things, but we need to be really focused, laser focused on solving those problems.
Great. Thank you for getting us started on that. So just as a follow through on that, perhaps looked at through the retrospective lens, how important has technology been for you personally? Not talking about healthcare or COVID, but to you. And did you connect with technology very early on, or did you stumble upon it? What was the story for you?
Like is honestly, I always feel that I'm behind in technology, to tell you the truth, the way at the pace that technology is evolving. And I feel like I get to points where I've plateaued on things, but then it takes a lot of effort because of the transformation of technology happening so quickly to keep up with it, right? So, for me, I did have exposure to it early on. I wouldn't say as young as 10 or something. Like I remember, like being in Karachi, we did have a computer with a green screen. I even remember, I think it was called Astra, and like every time you would turn it on, it goes Astra, the complete computer, and it would like boot up, and it would take a few minutes for it to boot up. I did have that exposure. It wasn't something that was embedded in day to day as it is right now, right? Like it was one of those things that, oh my God, there's this like the really important machine in the house that you can spend a few minutes on and off. So that was the story until I moved to Canada, and then it became part of the life, right? Because it was embedded in the education that we were getting, not in the high school but in university. It was expected that it would be part of your life. So most of my exposure with education at that time was around utilizing it in the education side, right? Like making sure that I was learning the technologies that I would be using or potentially facilitating use of when I graduated from the university. So that's where it was. Of course, at the same time, we were seeing social media kind of tick up, right? Like at that time, little platforms were popping up all over the place. It was a really unique time for all of us. So that's where it started affecting life. And of course, now I can't imagine a day without the technology, and to the point that, and I really like the nod to technology in the chapter, to say is like it can also be a hindrance, and I think now as a society we're getting to a place where it's it has this potential of taking away from our life rather than adding value to it. So that's in my phase of life. That's where I am to really assess whether the use of technology in every aspect of my life is a good thing or not, right? That being said, that might be a different story for others who are in this space and are using technology in a different way.
Great. That's so like perhaps I'm trying to like now connect that your take on like technology and how is that related to healthcare, and then how is technology of interest, how it has been of personal interest to you, and how has that influenced your own growth and development, if I may. So so from the perspective of an innovation incubation hub like CCIT, and we claim to be a nimble hub and doesn't really require a whole lot of resources. So for us, should technology be merely a tool, or should our strategic roadmap incorporate technology, or should the whole thrust of this strategic roadmap be technology? What would you advise us? And have you seen examples of something like whatever your advice is, whether it should be a tool or it should be your vision or mission as well? I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah,
you get
you
it?
absolutely are. You absolutely are. And one of the important things about my journey has been that it hasn't been a technology focused journey. I'll tell you that. Like, people think of me being in digital health, and they probably feel that I'm a technologist. I'm actually more interested in the people aspect of things. That's what attracted me to health informatics and digital health, because I can fill that unique role of sitting between technologists as well as practitioners and patients, right? And trying to understand what priorities are there for all of those spaces. So you know, with a center like CCIT, I always feel that incubation centers shouldn't have overt you know, focus on technology. I feel they should have focus on problems or people, really, right? Because if we think about where the world is going, especially with healthcare, everybody's talking about patient-centered care, right? So what that really means is you put the patient in the center of everything. And you know, throughout my career, one of the leaders I worked with always said is that when you have difficult decisions to make as a bureaucrat or as a technologist or whomever, remember the patient is in the center. And if you make a decision in the context of what is right for that patient, your decision becomes much easier, right? And there's a specific reason. It's not to do with, oh, this is my, you know, vision or my roadmap. It's about what's the right thing to do. And at that point, the right thing to do might be not to use technology, right? Or the right thing to do might be to let's invest in more technology and figure out how we can actually use it. So I do think, you know, my advice would, and this is for all incubation centers, I would say is don't forget the people aspect of things, because technology is a tool that we use to enable different things, right? Like, I think one of the things that's happened, and we're coming back to the right side, at least from my perspective, is before technology was used for everything. It was driving the business of healthcare. And when I say business of healthcare, is a patient care. Technology was dictating how providers of all types are providing care to the patients. That's a wrong equation, right? For me, the equation is, this is what we need for the patient. This is what our vision is for patient care. How do we enable that digitally, right? And how do we enable the right technology in that space to enable better healthcare? That's how I look at it, right? Because it's a people industry, right? With a lot of technology in it. Everywhere we go, you're going to come across technology in healthcare.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that. So just to repeat, what Zen has said is that use technology as a tool. Do not forget or do not ignore the people or the patients at the center of this universe, right? So whether we're talking about health tech, med tech, but that's what we're talking about, patient centricity, but you can also be considerate of the people who will be using that technology. Might not be the patients themselves, but be the doctors or the nurses. If you're talking about device innovation, right? So even for them, ease of use and things of that nature, right? So you keeping your client, quote unquote, at the center of the universe. So user experience, UX, from that perspective. I don't know, I'm kind of just broadening that concept of, you know, we're also looking at that. And so it brings up the concept, the point about empathy. What's the pain point, whether it's a patient or somebody else? Would you agree with that then, Zen?
Oh, wholeheartedly. I don't think we can be good healthcare providers as a population, right? Because if you think about Asad, you as a physician, you're a healthcare provider. If you think about me, I play a part in healthcare provision, right? We're all part of this ecosystem. We can't be that good at it if you don't have an empathy bone in us, right? And I do feel that I do feel that we're coming back there, but we did lose it for a while, I felt, right? Because yes, healthcare is a business, right? Doesn't matter if it's publicly administered, doesn't matter if it's privately or hybrid. There is a bottom line of saving dollars, there's a bottom line of making profit. All of that stuff is fine. But at the end of the day, we're dealing with people, human beings, right? And in that, every step of the way, we owe it to them to have empathy in every interaction that they have, including how we design technology for them and for who are providing the care.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'm going to mention something from the chapter, which are the 3 I's for medtech innovation. The 3 I's are identify, invent, and second is invent, and third is implement. So identify, invent, implement. 3 I's in the medtech innovation life cycle. How important do you think those are for the development of your own startup or company. And you could use the example of your digital health company or startup, Zenex perhaps, and tell us more about it. Although that you've misspelled your company's name, it should be ZENEX. I don't know why it's XEN. You're confusing us further now.
It was because I was just trying to be cool. That's it. I really like the three eyes. I think it's a really nice setup. I see it as a circle more than anything, because there's, and we talk about, I think when you talk about the medtech innovation process flow, I think there's an aspect of evaluation in there too, right? Like to say, like, did it actually do what we needed it to do? One of the things that we're seeing a lot is agile way of doing things, right? And capital A agile, because it's at every point we deliver some value, right? Release it, and then ensure that actually whether it met the need or not. And if it didn't, you scrap it and you do something else quickly. Right, we've come from this in the digital health space, in the e-health space. We've come from this like waterfall methodology, right? Go look at the requirements, goes into a black hole, something comes out, testing happens, and then we implement. And by the time that requirement turns into implementation, the business has changed, right? And then you have millions of dollars being spent in trying to fit that technology into the space and trying to fit the business around the technology. I'm sure you experience it in the space that you're in. I've seen it and experienced it. So that is one of the things that I am really passionate about, to make sure that we're delivering value quickly. That doesn't mean that we deliver low value things. It doesn't mean that we don't solve big problems, right? It is important to how we identify these things and how we how we create solutions and then we implement. I think that cycle needs to be much faster now, right? And you're seeing major organizations going towards that, right? You're looking at the big tech companies who are all processing and working in a much different way, because they know that expectations are changing. So that's another thing about technology. Technology is moving so fast that the expectations of our clients are changing. Clients as in patients is changing. They can get a whole lot of convenience if they walk into any other business, right? And that expectation gets ported over right into healthcare. And the frustration starts is when we are unable to deliver that sort of efficiency, right? And so I think that all of that works together. Those three eyes absolutely work together. There are a million problems we can solve, right? Absolutely. Nothing. We can't say, there are things in healthcare that work really well, and there's things in healthcare that we're like, how are we actually still surviving with such issues, right? That's the truth. So I do feel that we need to identify those things, but create value quickly so that we can assess whether a technology solution would work for this or not. So I do feel that the three eyes play a huge role in what I do every day. One of the things that I notice when I work with C-level and executive level folks is the intention is always there to do it that way, right? I think that's the thing. That what I wake up with every morning is knowing that everybody who's in the sector wants to do the right thing, right? And if we start with that, I think as a digital health professional, life is much easier, because then you can say, we're starting with the same baseline to say we want to do the right thing. Now, how to do the right thing can be difficult. So that's where I come in with C-level and executive level folks, is to have those sorts of conversations to say, which way do we want to go? What is the right way to go strategically? And sometimes you have to push in certain ways, and sometimes you have to give in some certain areas. So that the three eyes always play a role, not in just technology, but how you strategize to use technology in the digital enablement of healthcare.
Great, excellent. For the audience, please do feel free to put comments or questions, and I'll be happy to kind of move on to addressing those versus asking Zen questions entirely on my own. But this is getting more interesting as well, Zen, because if you were to think about the differences between digital health ideation or implementation in Canada versus Pakistan. So high income setting versus a low income setting. And if you could kind of tell us how do you see those differences, and what are the kinds of differences? And then as a member of the, what's it called, the Digital Health Board, you were elected to the Board of Digital Health Canada. And that was meant to, that organization is meant to advance Canadian digital health industry. So from that perspective, how do you see the differences, and how far behind is Pakistan from the through, if looked at through that lens?
That's such an interesting question, Asad, because it's, let me find the right words. I think there are more similarities than differences, I would say. There are problems that exist in, countries like Canada, United States, and there's problems that exist in countries like Pakistan that are very similar. And it's so interesting, I said, because when I think about, and when people here in Canada are thinking about innovation, one of the places they're looking at is low middle income countries to see what kind of technologies, what kind of jugaad has happened, right? That we can actually leverage and implement in our settings. So I do think the conversation has to be different. Conversation has to be is how can both those settings help each other? Because there's a lot of learning the West can do out of the East. There's no doubt about it, right? And vice versa. The privilege that we've had, and I call it a privilege because it is that governments are willing to make the investments into the healthcare infrastructure, because in a country like Canada is publicly administered, right? So it's part of our genetics as being Canadian, right? That healthcare is provided to you. It's just, that's what it is. And that's a blessing and a privilege for us. And in that, we take a lot of things for granted. And in that, there's also a lot of inefficiencies that get introduced that just don't need to be solved, because it's, the healthcare is always going to be there that way. I think countries like Pakistan have a much harder challenge to exist in a place where there is some publicly administered healthcare, there's a lot of private healthcare, while the country is also trying to come up with a way of enhancing innovation and technological transformation in itself. I'll tell you what's similar in there. I think both countries are trying to solve easy problems in many cases, because it's okay to do that, but our focus can't be that only. What happens is we overflow the ecosystem with tools that solve the same problem, right? And yes, that gives the consumer a lot of choice, and there's a level of a healthy balance in that. But beyond that, then it becomes nuisance, right? For example, if the standards of data integration are not implemented properly within all of these tools that are coming out, how do you bring that data together in a central place where it actually becomes a part of a conversation with the healthcare provider that the patient has, right? There's just so many platforms going on right now. So I think that is one, I would say, is a similarity, is that, as countries are flexing their innovation muscle and learning about innovation, and the ecosystem is coming up to speed, we're solving a lot of problems that are easy to solve, which is fine. Where it becomes important for systems, so like, bureaucracies, like administrators of healthcare, in countries like Canada, and hospitals, executives in countries like Pakistan, is to facilitate solving of big problems, right? And identifying innovators out of, who have been successful in those smaller problems, and bringing them together through things like CCIT, etc., to bring them together to solve really big problems that actually will yield better results down the line, right? I think that's a similarity. That's a challenge, I believe, both all sides are having. How do you pick the right problems and invest in it and make sure that you get what you need? Difference again is the level of investment. So I don't know exactly how much investment Pakistan or facilities have done in digital health. I know from Canada, this has been at least a 2 to 3 decade conversation, right? And the focus has been a lot on the provider side for the last majority of that time. Okay, so in that case, like doctors had become the focus of the solution provision, right? Making doctors' lives easier. Now what I'm seeing, and it's the right place to go, is acknowledging, and you'll see the language that I use healthcare providers. I don't use doctors only, right? Healthcare providers, it's a very diverse group of providers in our healthcare system who all have to be catered to, right? So now I'm seeing that you know, as a society, as Canadians, investments are being made in making lives of healthcare providers easy, which is a great place to be. And patient has actually come into the equation too now, right? And there's a lot of focus on the patient now and making the patient's life easier. I think that's another similarity. I believe what will happen in Pakistan, or is already happening in Pakistan and in other countries, is focusing on the patient right from the get-go, right? As this hyper speed that you will see and you are seeing, you know, a report from McKinsey came out and it did an assessment of the startup culture in Pakistan, which is looking really green, right? I think it's awesome, right? And you'll see that those innovators are going to look to the West to say, what have they already done? What have they learned? Where can we start? So leapfrog, right? We'll start. That becomes your baseline, right? There is no need for countries like low middle income countries to go back and relearn the lessons that other countries have already learned. That's the power of information that we've got. It's all available. That's where I think the advantage will come. And that active learning between the two sides is going to happen. So, you know, long-winded answer. I know it wasn't, you know, focusing on the differences, but I think there's more similarities than differences. Challenges are different, right? Like if I think about Canada, one of the biggest challenge now, and this will happen absolutely if it's not already happening, is that the concept of digital divide that we've always had and we've not paid attention to is going to get even more important to deal with. And I'll tell you why. Digital health is all about, you know, transformation of the healthcare system using technology and innovation. What we've done is tied healthcare provision with technology at the patient level. And that advancement comes with a lot of responsibility, because now we're not just talking about health determinants. We're talking about digital determinants that affect health, right? A simple example, a Canadian context example. COVID hit, physician offices shut down. Right decision for the public health side. Huge investment in virtual health, right? We saw an uptake that we've never seen before, investments that we've never seen before. The right thing to do brought us to where we should have been 10 years ago, right? It said, okay, we've got virtual health embedded into our healthcare system. Let's not lose it. Great. What happens to places where there is no connectivity? And there are places in Canada that don't have connectivity. There's rural and remote areas that don't have the bandwidth to have virtual care interactions. So yes, we brought convenience that you can see any physician across Canada, right? Or in that province, anywhere, from Metro Vancouver to Vancouver Island, you know, anybody from the north can do it. But when you don't have the connectivity or the bandwidth, it's useless, right? So what we did in that case is we've shut down the doctor's office, and we've introduced a tool that nobody can use in that space. I'm giving you an extreme example, right? Like, I'm not saying that there's a lot of those things, but it doesn't matter if it's a lot or not. In a publicly administered healthcare system, every patient is the same, right? Doesn't matter where you live. That's the commitment, right? So those are problems we need to solve. And you're going to see that in Pakistan if you've not already seen it. Yes, there is a lot more connectivity here with the phone. Everybody's got one. Some people have got two, right? Like, it's just like it's that's what it is. That's fine. But there is a population that will not have that access, who still deserve proper healthcare, right? So now we've tied digital, like a digital divide to healthcare delivery. And that's something we need to keep an eye on, because that the problem of digital divide that existed, I think we're gonna kind of exacerbate that as we go if we don't pay attention to that. So yeah, and that's what I talk about when I say hard problems to solve, right? You can solve a problem for people who are connected. Let's solve a problem for people who are not connected. I think it's an and conversation, not an or conversation, right? We've got to do this and we've got to do that. We can't leave people behind. At least that's my view as I deal in this space.
That's fascinating. So
Can I
many
add
important
something?
points. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's wonderful to listen, Zain, and the way he talks about the Pakistan health system and the Canada health system. Adding to your points, the challenge of decentralized data in Pakistan is going to be a big challenge in the next era. But I think the one more challenge, and I also want your comment on this, one more challenge will be the point of care testing. Like my palm testing is coming. The people are more reluctant to go to the hospital and get it done, like diabetic and vital signs, and so many things are being done on the home sites. And this data is going to be a challenge. So how you see this transformation of data or digital health coming to the homes, from hospital to homes? So how the governments, the health system is going to handle that one?
That's a beautiful question. So, and every day we deal with, even in Canada, we deal with this data challenge. I can't tell you how many times we ask a question, go, isn't this data available? Oh yeah, it is, but it's in that system. And it's shocking. I have to pause and like pick the right words, right? Because because we've invested so much money in standardizing and funding those initiatives that standardize things, but it's a really difficult problem to solve, right? So you see a hybrid of systems. You see these monoliths that come in that are integrated system that say, we will take care of your entire healthcare ecosystem. Just put us in. We've got these plugins, and you'll have all the modules that you need, and the data will be in the one place. Great. Remember that they've also grown through acquisition that are underneath are different systems that they're plugging together and trying to make work. So there's challenges there too, right? And then there's this other than best of breed theory that we came from, is that just use the best of the systems, and then we've got these, FHIR and HL7 and all of these new standards that are coming up, and we'll just throw data from here to there and then just make it all work. Absolutely, theoretically, all of that works. And I think, but there's a very small percentage of organizations that have actually done it successfully, because it's a hard problem to solve. And it is an ongoing problem that requires support and investment on an ongoing basis. It's not a one and done kind of situation, right? If you think about the data that you're collecting, then you've got to focus on the data quality of it, the data management of it, data governance of it, privacy, all of that stuff becomes the responsibility of the organizations that are actually collecting the data. So absolutely, that will continue to be a problem unless we make some really good decisions, and unless decision makers really understand the impact of system acquisition that it's going to have on the back end. So that's one. The other one, Kaleem, I think you mentioned, was around delivering healthcare outside of the hospital. So what we've been calling in Canada, and it's evolving, like in British Columbia, it's called hospital at home or care at home, care closer to home. There's lots of different things. So so there's a couple of underlying assumptions in that sort of a priority. One is patients like to be at home. Patients want to recover at home and be in the safety of their home. They shouldn't have to come to the healthcare facility for routine tests too, right? There should be connectivity for providers so they are not seeing patients that just are routine patients, you know, the frequent flyers, as we call them, right? All of that stuff is great. The other underlying thing that we cannot ignore, and it's important, is there's cost savings for hospitals and healthcare systems in that, right? Every patient that walks through the door is yes, depending on the healthcare system you're in, public or private, is either a revenue or a cost that way. If you just, you know, crudely put it that way, right? There isn't unlimited money to go into the healthcare sector. That's why a lot of innovation is happening, is because we want, and this is around the world, that because we want to redirect some of that waste money into making lives better for patients and better efficient systems in the healthcare processes. So I think we have to look at all of those things together and then and see, okay, where is this hospital at home model going? And again, as I said earlier, is that there is an influx of technology in this space, right? Every single smartphone has, you know, you can get an apps from smartphones. I've been on calls with innovators who saying, you know, they've come up with these really great, you know, handheld tools that can do every sort of measurement possible. I don't think the technology is the problem. If we want to have somebody out there, you know, a group of people, and you know, we in healthcare, we live in the a pilot implementation world, right? Everything is a pilot first before we leverage anything. So there's been lots of pilots done, lots of you know, proof of concepts done to provide this technology to patients. I don't think that's the problem. There's a space and market, and there is a benefit there. What is important is how is that embedded into the healthcare business every day? How is that embedded into the process? Right? So what I noticed in some of the places is that, you know, this hospital at home kind of concept came up, which is fabulous. I think it's great. But same solution for all problems is not possible. So we need to figure out what's the right ones that we would actually do that with, right? Because we also don't want to put patients in danger by sending them home and having adverse events there. But I think we're mature enough to understand that. What I do find is that it was tagged on as an add-on to healthcare providers to do things and monitor patients at home. They couldn't find people to actually dedicate to that. So what providers were doing, healthcare providers were doing in hospitals, where they would be doing the rounds and doing what they do face to face with physically with people, and then in some portion of their day they would have to go and monitor all these other people. I think that's where we can leverage a lot of different skills, right? It doesn't have to be doctors doing that. It can be RPNs, LPNs, it can be RNs doing that sort of monitoring also, right? So I think that will also change the conversation around the power dynamics in the healthcare system, right? That the value that healthcare providers bring is based on the diversity of skills and knowledge that they bring together, right? So the other thing that's also evolving is team-based care, right? So primary healthcare centers that are developing so that you stay away from emergency rooms. There is care centers, you know, closer to your home that you go in there and you've got this, you know, interdisciplinary team that will provide the patient with all the supports that they need. And then if more support is needed, then you go into an acute care setting. Right? So I think that's another thing, which is a middle ground to, you know, you will be served at home for things. If you can't be served at home, you'll go into these primary healthcare centers or team-based care environments. And if you can't be done there, then you'll go into acute care settings, right? We've been of course, in Canada, from that perspective, there's a huge push to encourage people not to go into the emergency department because it's just not the right place for all problems, right? So I think I don't know if that problem exists in Pakistan or not, but that's something has another accelerator in making home and healthcare better, or team-based care investments more within reach, and then putting acute care center to really solve those acute problems, not everyday things. I don't know, Kaleem, if that answers your questions and talks about some of the challenges, but these are things that are happening, and I think are should be kept in mind as decisions are made.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this is what exactly, the more power to the health system, and the healthcare workers will solve some kind of problems, I think.
Absolutely. Good
Yeah,
question.
thank you very much for that, Kaleem. This was a very interesting discussion. Nazia has also put some comments over there. Nazia, would you like to ask? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, Dr. Sir, thank you so much. Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I just want to know, because my field is basically public health, but more closely I work for the older people. Unfortunately, there is no app or any kind of information related to the assessment, psychological, social, what were their needs. Unfortunately, there is a huge gap. So what I feel, because I'm already working with pediatrics and looking after digital health projects, so I don't know, being a one single person, how to move forward and how to take a lead. I was labeled as a female having a social work and health policy management degree from Akhan as a people kahin se bhi utھ ke aa jate hain. So doctor was recognized as a clinician, but my role was more, it's more like a fun, but I'm okay with it, because as far as I know where my direction is, because I want to work for that cause. So I want to know that how can I start, because I have some list of shelter homes. They are reluctant to share their information. Second, how I feel that I should write a protocol on that. First, what are the needs of those people living in Karachi? And other than that, how shelter homes are catering their services. So there is no such app. So sir, I want to know that how should I move forward individually without any support? I know my question sounds silly, but
I think you're hitting it. Like, and first of all, thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Right. I think I know, I can feel the angst in your voice, that it's a difficult situation you're in. And it's, I would say it's very similar. Like, this is another similarity. It's just, in Canada, we see the same thing. There's a lot more focus on elderly individuals now, and understanding the needs of people as they grow older. There's some facts here, right? For example, we're living longer. We've got to figure this out, right? We've got to say there is a huge group of patients that we deal with who are younger. Then they kind of go off the radar for a while when they're invincible, right? Like as we're teenagers and stuff, and then we come back when we hit the middle ages into the healthcare system, and then we're frequent flyers at as we grow older. So one thing I would say is that this is not just understanding the needs. We can understand anybody's needs if there's a will to do so. It's a cultural thing, right? And by cultural, I mean organizational culture, and as well as the political culture, right? How do we value older adults, right, in this healthcare ecosystem? It's a people problem, not a technology problem, right? Is there really the same amount of rigor being put into understanding and solving those problems that are experienced by older adults that is being, for other areas of the healthcare system, is a question. I think this is a self-reflection question. And Azia, I don't think there is an easy answer, but what I will say is this, and this is going to sound really direct, so I'll say it anyway, because when it hits the pocketbook of the healthcare administrators, it's going to become a problem they want to solve. And I'll tell you why. The cost of providing services to older adults is much higher, right? And if you look at the trajectory of where the healthcare systems are going about investment of health dollars, money isn't flowing. It's not unlimited, right? So they've got to make some decisions around how they can change their healthcare, how we can change our healthcare delivery to different populations. Older adults are where a lot of investment is required, and you'll start seeing a lot of listening that's happening because it's actually hitting the bottom line, right? They know that, we know that if we focus on understanding the issues that are experienced by older adults, may they be mental health, poverty, access to technology, access to better healthcare, transportation, all of these things. These are quality of life issues. They're not just healthcare issues. And again, that's why it's important, because we don't forget how it needs to be a multidisciplinary team and multidisciplinary providers that need to come in and collaborate to solve these problems. It can't just be a healthcare problem. Healthcare problem is a symptom of something that these individuals are experiencing, right? Same with shelters. Nobody chooses to go into a shelter, right? And I'm assuming here the definition of shelter is the same as we have in Canada, which is homeless shelters and that, right? Not what we like, not senior care homes, which is a different thing. We don't call those shelters. So I'm assuming that's the language. The reality is that there will be, we need to understand why people end up in the place that they do and actually deal with the root cause. Again, goes to solving hard problems, right? It's not easy, let me say. It's more convenient to solve problems that we see in our face and solve it, because plates of healthcare providers, healthcare administrators are always full. We've never come across a person in healthcare who says, I don't have enough to do today, right? So in that state of mind, when we're working in that pace, we're going to solve problems that are, we can see a solution to right away, right? So what you're talking about, Nazia, is a fundamental thing that needs to be more of a collaboration. And I know it's a tall order, but I do hope that you speaking up today about it, there will be somebody around this table who will say, you know what, let's talk. And I think that's the importance of these conversations, right? Like there might be opportunities to solve some problems together. And now, like, look me up on LinkedIn. If there's things that I can help with, please reach out, right? Like, and it, absolutely, I'm far away, but if there are people that you need to talk to, or, contacts you need to make with folks here who have done it or understand these big, hairy, audacious problems that we've got. And so for sure, like I'm happy to do that.
Thank you so much for that, Nazia. That was a great question, great discussion we've had. And I was going to offer Zen's support to your project, but thank you for that, Zen. So you beat me to it. And there's also Digital Health Resource Center, DHRC, which is very much AKU and AKDN based. Salim Sayani was traveling, so he couldn't make it. Yeah. But Nazia, I'm happy to connect you with Salim as well. And so between Salim and Zen, that'll be interesting to see, how does something like this then get scaled globally, perhaps, if it's a startup, something along those lines. But it's that passion project of Nazia. I think she's passionately involved in that particular age group, and she wants to do something for them. So very commendable. Thank you for what you're doing, Nazia. And so we're coming up to the top of the hour, but if anybody else would like to ask a question of Zen, or you can put a comment or a question in the chat box, or you can write to us and we can connect you with Zen. But Zen, while we just kind of maybe somebody's gonna put in a question or a comment, would you like to give younger folks, I don't know how many young folks are on this particular call, a few I can see, but young or old doesn't really matter, but for innovators and entrepreneurs looking to delve into tech-based solutions for healthcare, So we'll keep it specific or relevant to technology for this particular take-home message.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are emerging out of the digital health space. I think collaboration is going to be key, and utilizing centers like CCIT to prove things out are going to be really important. I feel like, like Kaleem was talking about, the home health monitoring type of stuff is going to be really important, right? I think that's a space for sure. Artificial intelligence is going to be thrown at us whether we're ready or not. So I think, keeping that in the forefront is going to be important, and not losing the touch with how we use that to solve human problems. I think that's really important. I do feel that, like, I won't do anybody a favor if I don't say this. So I think it's important that as we're in this startup space, everybody's going to be clamoring to get into, funds that are available to prove out stuff. That's what it is. Venture capitalists are going to come, and they're already starting to come in Pakistan and funding lots of mega projects. As innovators, I really hope that the collaboration continues and it doesn't become an unhealthy competition, right? At the end of the day, we're trying to solve the problem for the same people, right? So I think that is very important, that we don't forget to look to our sides and behind us to say, who can we actually bring forward? And in that, we need to bring more visibility for women in technology. I don't think there is, it shouldn't be it shouldn't be optional. That's what I would say. And it's not a problem that only Pakistan has to deal with. Like, Canada is dealing with the same thing. So I think that I would say an emerging trend in digital health is seeing more women entrepreneurs, innovators, and digital enablers. That's very important. Internationally, I would say, and one of the things that I'm focusing on with Digital Health Canada is providing voice to diverse groups. So people of color, who are a major part of society here, are now actually being seen, right? And it's important that as leaders and influencers in the space, we are guiding organizations towards seeing those experts who are not really from the country that they're in, right? So one of the things that we do, like I try to do, is people who move and come with some sort of credentials, how do they integrate into the digital health space, right? So I do think, like, there's going to be a balance, but there's some emerging trends in the startup space, which is, one, collaboration is going to be really important. And if you pick up anybody's article who's anybody in digital health, they'll tell you like 5 trends that are coming up, right? And it's usually all the same. I don't know, Asad, if that helps. I know you wanted me to focus on technology, but I just can't. I can't just focus on one.
No, this is really good. This is important, because I also got really interested in the digital divide. I've heard that before, and there was a talk, not in this webinar series, but another one by a lady called Nigat Dad, and she's very well known across Pakistan, and she's been working on digital related, but no, I don't think she's specifically healthcare related, but more from the tech base. And she talks about the digital divide. And when you spoke about digital determinants, I'm just wondering, because I'm familiar with the social determinants of health, and the sustainable development goals, and we've got the commercial determinants of health as well. Do we now have the digital determinants of health? Is that something that's coming up as well?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's like it's so interesting, because in our quest for innovation and digital transformation, we've actually created this thing now, right? And there is new work happening in understanding it and how closely it's tied. And in some cases, you'll see is that these digital determinants are as important as health determinants in some populations, especially as we become more of a virtual space, right? Like, we're not going to go back to all face-to-face, in-person kind of health interactions. It doesn't make sense. Convenience-wise, it just doesn't make sense to go back to that, right? Like, so So I think this is going to start evolving, and you'll start seeing a lot more studies coming out of it. It's I would say it's in its infancy, but I think we're understanding it. And you will notice, and this person Nigat Dad, I think you will notice that these things are actually coming out of not of healthcare. They're actually going to come out of other sectors who are seeing this, and we'll have to translate it into healthcare. And what we can't do is wait for somebody to figure it out and then adopt it. What we need to do is just step forward and say, how can we actually keep up with this knowledge base that's being created and add to it with the context of healthcare, so that it doesn't become just an economics kind of a conversation, because that's where it will go, right? It actually needs to be a care-driven conversation too.
Those are great points, and I'm now just thinking that perhaps as a follow-up to this session, maybe next year we will kind of invite you, and then I think maybe we should definitely get into the ethics of digital health and talk about the ethics of such technology, and get away from really what the chapter was about, because none of the chapters in the book actually do talk about the ethics of innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship, and this divide that is probably going to worsen between the haves and the have-nots. When I was working in the US, I mean, I could already see a divide. Talking about more than 8 years ago, I've been back in Karachi now for 8 years, but I could see the difference based on just vaccination rates. And Canada, I'm assuming, is better off compared to the US. But with just parity being a huge issue, access to healthcare, then this digital divide is certainly going to worsen health indices in the West, particularly probably in the US. I would think. I don't know. Maybe Canada is going to not do as poorly as that. But what do you think?
I think it's going to be I think it's a problem that we all experience in a way, right? Like I think it's going to be. We cannot take our eyes off of this problem, right? Because what COVID did was really show us that there is a problem that we need to resolve, and then this is a growing issue. And in that, when you start having more philosophical things around vaccinations, because it's not like, for example, in Canada right now, we're at a really good spot for percentage of people vaccinated, at least with the first dose. What we're challenged with now are people with philosophical differences on vaccinations, right? That is going to continue to be there because of the information that those people have. It doesn't mean that we write them off, right? It means that there's some tough conversations need to have, because in their mind, they are speaking the truth, right? And in our mind, we're speaking the truth, right? So how do we find commonalities and deal with it? So I absolutely think, I think I would love to come back and talk about the ethics of digital health and how we deal with this disparity and how our culture and community actually also play a part in it, right? So for sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we're going to call it a day or call it a night. It's evening for us. Zen, why don't you go back to bed? I forgot to mention, it's 4 a.m. It's what, 5 a.m. now for you?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's past 5.
My God. Thank you so much for doing this for us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And this chapter, I know is it's such a great chapter because it's enabled these conversations. So Ariba, great work on this. I said great work, and Marion, great work. I highly recommend this book for folks. And I've promised Marion that I'll write a review on Amazon about the book too. So I think download it. It's very cost effective. Just get it. It should be a resource in everybody's reader for sure. And thank you so much. And I hope this was informative for folks. And I know we went over time. I apologize for that, but man, I could keep going. This is such a great conversation. And
thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care.
Evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.